This RealAg Radio podcast is brought to you by Barricade 2 herbicide from FMC. Barricade 2 herbicide destroys tough broadleaf weeds like narrow-leaved hawksbeard, cleavers, night-flowering catchfly, and kochia without compromising the safety of your cereal crop. Barricade 2 herbicide. Tough on weeds, gentle on crops.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio.
Hello and welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio Channel 147. I am your host for the day, Lyndsey Smith. You're right, it's Wednesday. Should have been here yesterday, but I get to host today's show and the Farmer Rapid Fire, brought to you by Pioneer Seeds Canada, tomorrow for our Thursday show. So I'm super pumped. It's a great week. It also happens to be officially the first day of spring. Yesterday, the Real Agriculture team got together. We get together every 2 weeks for a meeting. And we all got together and we always start the meeting with a question of the week. And yesterday's question was, what is, to you, the first real sign of spring? And so we all have different things. So Sean said, of course, you guessed it, spring training for baseball. But it varied between, what plants would start to bud, or, whether it was, for me, it's the rhubarb finally coming out of the ground, those sorts of things. So, but all of us, of course, spring on the mind, and in agriculture, we're counting down the days till we can get those planters and seeders rolling. And for those of us with livestock, sheep, cattle, goats, whatever it might be, we're waiting for that very green grass and then waiting patiently, of course, to turn out those animals. You don't want to do it too soon. We don't want to stress out those plants. We know that. All right. So I'd love to know if you'd like to share. Find us, of course, on social media. Let us know what's your sure sign that spring has sprung. Because, of course, for those of us in the northern climates, just because it's March 20th, March 21st, somewhere in there, even though it officially is spring, let's face it, I grew up just south of Winnipeg, and spring sometimes really didn't arrive until early May. So we could be in for a long haul, and from where I sit right now, just west of Ottawa, it's a pretty chilly one. Today, a bit of flurries out there. It's definitely not feeling very spring-like, but we will get there, I promise. On today's show, of course, we've got a great show lined up. I've got Phil Shaw joining me. I'm super excited to chat with him. We're going to talk about the corn and bean market. We're going to stick close to Ontario, but definitely going to ask about some of those export drivers and where we're at with some of those global crops that we're watching that really drive that corn and bean price here in Canada. We've also got a product spotlight with Michaela Lobay. She'll join me in the third segment, and then we're going to talk drought. We have to talk drought, but we're going to talk about production insurance. What options are there actually for farmers in Alberta specifically who are looking at potentially much less water being allocated under the irrigation district system? We know that that's a big concern. We're already hearing some, yellow, if not red flags on water allocations for the year ahead. So we'll be talking to AFSC on that one. I always stumble on that acronym because it's so close to AAFC, but it's not. It's AFSC. There you go. Okay. And at the end of the show, I've also got a discussion on a new website that just launched, gocrops.ca. This is an amalgamation of 4 different performance trial sites that have been amalgamated for Ontario growers. And I'll slide in a little bit of the top news if I can. There's a few things to talk about today, of course. And as always, if you'd like to give us any feedback on today's program, yesterday's, whenever you happen to catch the podcast or the radio show, you can call that RealAg feedback line, 1-855-776-6147, or you can send me an email, lsmith@realagriculture.com. Without further ado, let's get to today's show. We're going to take a quick break, and I'll be back with Mr. Phil Shaw right after this.
Does your N stabilizer contain an active ingredient load high enough to be agronomically effective? If not, it could be costing you time and money. If you're putting down a nitrogen stabilizer, put your trust in Koch Agronomic Services. Solutions like Super U, Tribune, and Anvil. Each delivers high active ingredient concentrations that low-rate products just can't match. Compare how imitator products stack up to agronomically effective solutions at defendyourn.ca.
The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com is your one-stop shop for everything a canola grower needs. Check out our free video series on YouTube for all the latest in canola agronomy, research, marketing, and more. Don't have time to watch? Download the podcast version of the Canola School on RealAgriculture.com or anywhere you download your podcasts. Stay on top of all things canola with the Canola School on RealAgriculture.com, brought to you by BASF and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
CDC Endure is a new oat line from Alliance Seed. High yielding with excellent disease resistance and the quality end users ask for, all in one great oat variety. CDC Endure provides the high beta-glucan levels to make heart-healthy products like breakfast cereals. For more information on CDC Endure oats, as well as any other products from Alliance Seed, check out allianceseed.com or visit any Alliance Seed authorized retailers.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio here on this Wednesday, March 20th. I am your host, Lyndsey Smith, and the answer to your above-ground nitrogen loss problem is Anvil, nitrogen stabilizer from Koch Agronomic Services. To learn how Anvil's dual-active ingredients deliver extended protection, visit kochag.ca. That's KOCHAG.ca. Joining me now for today's market commentary, I've got Phil Shaw. He, of course, is farmer out of Ontario, but you probably know him on Twitter or X as @Agridome. He's a grain analyst, of course, and a longtime writer for the markets, of course. Phil, welcome here.
Well, thank you very much, Lyndsey. Appreciate it.
Now, we're used to having you on the Farmer Rapid Fire to hear what's going on the farm this week, but today we're going to talk markets, and of course you follow these closely. Let's maybe start on the cash side. What are you seeing on the corn and soybean side in Ontario? I know it hasn't necessarily been a rosy picture, but what are we seeing right now?
No, it certainly hasn't been a rosy picture. I wrote a column not late last fall, but about the middle of the fall last year, talking about how big supply was winning. And, you know, the focus behind that piece is that we just have a big crop last year. At that time, I thought the big crop was coming in. And that's essentially what has happened is a bigger crop and bigger ending stocks through last year have been, you know, set prices on a long stepward escalator down. And, that's got us to where we are today. It's been a bit unusual because I expected a post-harvest rally because we always have one, but we didn't have one this year. And so it's manifested itself in cash values, which are much lower than a lot of producers have become used to over the last few years. Like, for instance, right now, old crop corn in Ontario is about $4.70 to $5 a bushel. Soybeans are around $15, or a little bit over that for old crop, $15.30 or so, and so that's less than what we've had over the last few years. Quite a bit less, really. What's interesting on the cash side, I find it interesting anyway, is that new crop on the cash side in Ontario and Quebec is much higher than old crop. And, you know, like, for instance, $5.73 for new crop corn in Chatham, and the old crop price is $5. That's quite unusual when that happens. But basically what we have is we have a lot of old crop corn still in the bins in Ontario, and export bids haven't been very, very good. And it's not the time we get rid of it anyway. So maybe our exporters are finding quite a bit of competition on the open ocean. You know, we have preferential treatment usually going into the UK and Ireland for Ontario and Quebec corn. And, you know, it just, hopefully it gets there, but the bids haven't been as strong as they once were in past years. So there's just a lot of old crop corn around in Ontario, and that is partly what is affecting basis levels. And, you know, it's easily $2 less than a year ago, or $1.50 a bushel less than a year ago. So that makes that makes quite a difference. But like I say, these new crop values are higher for corn, and that's unusual. We don't usually see that, and I really don't know a good reason why, other than everybody's looking for coverage out there because there's a lot of uncertainty. And those markets for Ontario corn might be affected by some of the Ukrainian corn that's being railed and being shipped into Central Europe. So it's just hard to know, but our cash prices are manifesting themselves lower based on the futures values that have gone lower. But keep in mind that we have a Canadian dollar that continues to be a stimulus for Ontario and Quebec cash grain prices, because that's fluttering in the 73 and 74 cent level. And that is always helpful because, as you know, if you had a Canadian dollar at par, which we had, 10 or 15 years ago, or if we had it up in the 80s or 90s, we'd have probably negative basis values here in Ontario, and prices would be at levels that we don't want to even talk about.
Right. We do not want to mention those. Yeah.
Yeah. So, it's been a long story with regard to the supply because, we had a big U.S. crop last year. We had a big Brazilian crop, soybeans, even though it is CONAB, the Brazilian crop rating agency, is rating their crop less than USDA is. But still, I say, how does it hardly matter? Because we still have much, much lower prices. And the safrinha crop, which is just finished being planted in Brazil now, where they get 75% of their corn output from the safrinha crop, it's in the ground and growing, and it's got adequate moisture so far. And, there's still lots of production risk with it, and it still might affect the market going forward. But that's what I guess producers could look at in the short term to see how that goes. If it goes good, it's probably not going to be good for prices. If they run into problems, which they may, then we may see some appreciation.
Right.
I know that both old crop and new crop, soybeans and corn, have gone up a little bit since the end of February. That might be because non-commercial demand, speculators and others might be covering their shorts. In other words, a small change in market position. But things are bearish. You just can't get away with that with the amount of grain we've got in the world right now.
Now, a few things. I'm glad you mentioned the safrinha crop. That definitely, a few months ago, there was speculation it might be on the dry side for that, right? But it does, as you mentioned, sounds like there's some decent moisture potentially, so that could bump production maybe more than we thought, which maybe doesn't play well. You did mention, I wanted to come back to this just a bit, corn moving into the UK, into Ireland, and the bids not being necessarily super strong right now, but that seasonally maybe isn't. When are those bids sort of the busiest? When will we typically see the most corn?
Yeah, I think it varies. I think it varies from year to year depending on market conditions, because I always say the great equalizer to moving grain is cheap. In other words, if it gets cheap enough, it's just like oil on the ground; it runs to the lowest place, and it's the same thing with exporting corn out of Ontario. See, we utilize about a third of Ontario corn in ethanol, and about another third in feed and food and residual supply, and then the rest of it we have to export. And of course, we import corn from the States sometimes too. It's kind of an odd situation, but that does happen. But I would say that, to answer your question, it's mostly ahead of us. Like, it's mostly April, May, June when that would happen. Bids would have to improve to get some of this old crop corn going. And we've been lucky the last few years because we've had preferential treatment into the EU and into Ireland for our corn, while the Americans didn't. But that may be changing now. And of course, there's Ukrainian corn moving into Western Europe, and so it all depends on the price of it. But as soon as you get grain out on the open seas, then you're competing with the least cost producers wherever they are. And from a Western Canada perspective, I know that you're always thinking about exporting grain and getting out of there. From an Eastern Canada perspective, it's better for us to utilize it here, whether it's ethanol or whether it's feed demand or whether it's anything else, because typically when you get out on the open seas, the great common denominator is cheap. and if it's cheap enough, it'll move. And so that's not the greatest thing either. But keep in mind that, there's something going on because new crop bids are much higher than old crop bids right now. It probably mostly has to do with a lot of old crop corn around, but other than that, I really don't know.
So that does, of course, we are now about 2/3 of the way through March. It won't be long before crop is going in the ground. I'm certainly starting to see, the photos and snaps and sharing of seed getting moved into place on farm. And are you hearing from farmers as to whether or not, they might be shifting acres to beans? Neither corn nor beans seems, as attractive as maybe, as you mentioned, the past couple of years. Are you hearing any discussions of any choices to be made here before the crop goes in the ground?
I think that's an interesting question because I felt the same thing. And my initial thought was, my gosh, we won't be growing as much corn in Ontario or Quebec because it costs a lot to grow corn. And last year's crop might have been one of the most expensive crops we've grown in a long, long time. And with the market going south of us, it's kind of put a few of us probably in a precarious position with selling our crop. And when you think about planting for this year, corn is a lot more expensive to grow than soybeans. And I felt myself, my goodness, you think about the risk that you take with regard to putting all this money into a corn crop in the spring and with prices lower, the risk associated with it might be perceived higher, and I thought there would be less corn grown in Ontario and Quebec this coming year, but I don't think latest Statistics Canada's number are really bearing that out too much. Like typically we grow about 2.1 million acres of corn in Ontario, and I don't think there's projected any change for that for the coming year. But when you think about it, I often think about this. We have finite acres in Ontario. I know the guys up in the Ottawa Valley and Northern Ontario might say, well, Phil, that's not necessarily the case, but we reach the upper limits in corn production to a certain extent. So I don't know if there'll be ever more and more corn like you see in or soybeans like you see in Brazil, because we just run out of land and our Canadian climate gets in the way. But I have seen corn acres in Ontario drop from 2.1 to 1.8 or even 1.7 if we have a bad spring. So if we have a wet spring and can't get the acres in, then you'll see a shift. But even though you and I are talking about the agricultural economics seem to favor soybeans, and that has been the case across the greater American Corn Belt just on futures values since the late fall, I'm not necessarily thinking you're going to see that, because our Ontario wheat acres, I think they're about 860,000, if I recall correctly. They're pretty good. They're not going to change much. And you would think it would be less corn acres, but it's probably unlikely that will happen. Because, even at new crop values right now, which are $5.73 a bushel, and maybe they'll push up to $6. That's, knock on wood, historically, that's much better than we've expected in the past, even in the last 10 years. And so I don't think we'll see much shift in that, but I do understand the sentiment that you're implying, because I thought the same thing. I thought, my goodness, there should be less corn acres in Ontario, but from what I've seen from projections, that's not the case. But of course, if we have a tough spring, maybe that will happen. Like I've seen it before where we'll really drop, because if it gets late, at a certain point, people switch over to soybeans.
Yeah. And as you mentioned, the winter wheat acre matters as well. But if you've got winter wheat in good shape, that's unlikely to come out. So if those acres stay in, as you mentioned, the acres are pretty static as far as the total acres that go in. So total acres being relatively static means, unless we have a rough spring, I don't foresee that number changing much either. And we shall see how that bears out. I know the going sentiment in Ontario anyway is we want very dry conditions to get the crop in the ground and then have it improve. We don't always get that, but we wish, we hope. Every year. And
keep in mind that Ontario is a very wide province geographically. For instance, I'm in the deep southwest, close to the Detroit-Windsor border. And while some of your listeners, your listeners are all over the world, but I mean, some of your listeners that are listening to this that grow corn in my area are on the Quebec border. which is 7 hours away.
That's right.
And not only is the geography different, the way you grow corn is different, the market is different for corn. The cash markets are incredibly different in Eastern Ontario, and the culture is different as well. Yeah. So it's a huge geographic area, and there's different multifaceted market forces that impact these people all across Ontario. For instance, here in the deep southwestern Ontario, we'll load corn, ship it to Michigan, dump the corn, pick up corn in Michigan, ship it back to Ontario. It doesn't make any sense, from an optic standpoint. But those types of things happen. While in Eastern Ontario, obviously they can ship into ethanol plants in Quebec and the dairy market, and there's all kinds of different nuances. If the one thing, if we're talking cash values in Ontario, what happens if the Canadian dollar goes to 85 cents, or quickly goes to 80 or 81 or 82 cents? That has a big impact on our cash values, especially for soybeans and wheat. Not so much for corn, but it's that other thing that Ontario and Quebec producers have to manage, is that gyration in the Canadian dollar that can really affect Canadian basis. And I really have no strategies on how to deal with that, because it's very difficult when it moves quickly. And we've been at these ranges for 73, 74, 75 cents for probably 3 or 4 years now. But that's not normal. Usually it climbs and falls much quicker than it has over the last 2 or 3 years. So that could be a wild card coming up in 2024. I hope not, because at these Canadian dollar levels, people get used to these very high basis levels, but I've seen it negative, and I don't really want to go there again. But that's just part of, and that's what I mean, Canadian basis. But that's what farmers think about when they price grain. So it's always that other part of the marketing equation when it comes to Eastern Canadian grain prices that you have to think about.
All right. Well, we will be watching the Canadian dollar then, Phil, and we'll see if that ends up being a major factor this year or not. Phil Shaw joining me, of course, from way down in the Deep South. You're right, Phil. Joining me on the show today. Thank you so much for your insight today.
Well, thank you very much, Lyndsey. I much appreciate it.
Excite your crops with inputs from Excite Bio. Access nitrogen and phosphorus with Excite Bio's lineup of inoculants and ag biologicals. Since 2010, they've been helping farmers harness the power of the soil. Learn more at excitebio.ca. All right, we hop now to a quick commercial break, and I'll be back with today's product spotlight right after this.
Want a product that will give you nitrogen all season long? Then you want to try Envita. Envita gets directly into the cells of the plants, and it's easy to apply, foliar or in furrow. Envita provides the flexibility you need for your farm practices. Whether you want to reduce your nitrogen and maintain yield, or maintain your nitrogen and increase yield, Envita fits your farm. Envita SC formulation is OMRI registered. To learn more about Envita, visit azotic.com. That's AZOTIC.com.
Before you get back in the field this year, spend some time with the Corn School on RealAgriculture.com. Get all the information you need on hybrid selection, planting depth, crop inputs, and more from a wide range of industry experts. A massive library of video content is available on demand when you need it most. Spend your time outside of the field, inside the classroom, with the Corn School on RealAgriculture.com.
Peter Johnson at Wheat Pete, RealAgriculture.com, and what an opportunity! Oh my gosh! You think you can't grow better wheat? You are absolutely wrong. We're going to show you how to strive for those record wheat yields that they get in the UK and in New Zealand. You can grow 150 bushel wheat. I'll show you how.
Catch Wheat Pete's Word every Wednesday on RealAgriculture.com or download the podcast on iTunes or Spotify.
Welcome back to Real Ag Radio. I'm Lyndsey Smith, and it is time for our product spotlight. Joining me today, I've got Michaela Lobay. She's technical sales agronomist, of course, with ADAMA Canada. How are you today, Michaela?
I'm doing very well, thank you. How about yourself?
I'm doing well. Okay, so exciting conversation today. We're going to talk fungicides. We're going to talk disease management. First, though, let's set it up. Tell me about the exceptional independent trial results managed by Intent that ADAMA Canada is drawing information from.
Yeah, so this past year in 2023, we partnered with a third-party company called Intent, and their main focus is on large-scale farmer-run trials and data collection. And we partnered with them, so we were able to get third-party results and also allowed us to have a wide range of growers throughout Western Canada. We had over 50 farmer-run trials in Western Canada, and these ranged on crops from canola, peas, and lentils. And we were going up against the major competitors on the market. And through these, we were able to find out that Maxentis consistently performed against the major competitors and performed in a way to have best-in-class results in both peas, canola, and lentils. Maxentis has created a lot of buzz, and this has been shown early through the sales thus far.
All right. Okay. So exciting things ahead for the season for Maxentis. Now, you did mention, so for canola, pea, and lentil, what does this product protect against?
Yeah, for sure. So Maxentis controls sclerotinia in canola, and then in that pea and lentil acre, we're going against anthracnose and mycospirella. We had a lot of trials throughout Western Canada, and throughout all of these, Maxentis in canola consistently was a top performer against the leading competitors on the market, and we're seeing on average a 7-bushel increase compared to the untreated check. And in lentils, we saw an average increase of 4 bushels. On a low disease pressure year, this is awesome to see that we're actually seeing a 15-bushel increase of Maxentis against the untreated check.
Okay, now what makes Maxentis unique?
Yeah, Maxentis is unique. It's the first time we're seeing azoxystrobin and prothioconazole in an all-in-one formulation. And another unique thing about Maxentis, it is powered by ADAMA's Azorbital technology. This is a unique solvent system to ADAMA that we are seeing excellent plant uptake and excellent translaminar movement within that leaf surface. And by getting that great coverage on that leaf surface, you're getting excellent control of those major diseases that we are concerned about throughout the growing season.
All right. Now, of course, for farmers, ease of use comes into play, planning and logistics comes into play. How will farmers access this product as far as packaging?
Yeah, for sure. Well, 2 points there. So ease of use, this is an EC formulation. So growers aren't going to have to worry about that chalky substance or anything like that might be left in the jug. It's going to be easy to flow out of the jug, easy rinsing, everything like that. And with regards to packaging, there are 2 different SKU sizes available. It comes in a case of 2 jugs that are 8.45 liters or in an 18.1 liter drum.
All right. Now, for those farmers who are planning, of course, this is the time of year to be penciling out what the plan is for the year. For those with those canola and pulse acres that they want to protect, who can they talk to? Where can they go for more information about what ADAMA Canada has to offer?
Yeah, for sure. You can either talk to your local area business manager, talk to your local retail, or you can also visit allinonfungicides.ca/Maxentis.
All right, and I'm going to point out Maxentis, Maxentis. It is correct. Exactly as it as it sounds, but just in case you're curious, there you go. All right, Michaela, thank you so much. I just before I let you go, what are you most excited about for the growing season ahead?
I'm probably most hoping for some rain, and then also just for growers and farmers to get the best yields possible, try to get things back on track.
Absolutely. That's I will also hope for rain. We'll do that together. How's that sound? We'll see what we can do.
Perfect.
All right. Thanks, Michaela. Thanks so much for joining me on the show today.
Yes, have a great day.
All right. We'll be back with more RealAg Radio right after this.
What's next for your fields? At Pioneer, delivering industry-leading genetics drives everything we do. From the scientists in the lab to our local teams with boots on the ground, we are determined to get there first. Developing top-performing products, proven in more growing conditions than ever before. Pioneer. What's next happens here. Visit pioneer.com/Canada to learn more.
Hi, I'm Bernard Tobin, host of the Soybean School on RealAgriculture.com. Throughout the year, on the Soybean School, we'll bring you timely agronomic video content from planting to harvest, from the latest agronomic research to the latest in production technology. Check out our massive video library on YouTube, RealAgriculture.com, or download the audio podcast versions wherever you get your podcasts. The Soybean School is brought to you by BASF and Syngenta Canada.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio, Channel 147. I am your host, Lyndsey Smith, and Co-op knows your community because we live here too. Our teams are your trusted partners with a range of expertise to help support your entire farm operation. Co-op, here for your farm, here for your family. Learn more at coop.crs/farm. Joining me now on the line is Jesse Cole. He manages insurance products with AFSC, I have to say that so carefully, Agriculture Financial Services Corporation in Alberta. Jesse, welcome here.
Thanks, Lindsay.
All right, let's talk, I guess this is your business, is talking about risk, so maybe it's not an uncomfortable conversation for you, but definitely for many of the producers in the southern areas of Alberta, drought is top of mind, managing that drought, trying to figure out what the season may hold. Specifically for farmers that rely on irrigation, we know that there is potentially some changes coming for the year ahead that may impact production. How are you managing, helping farmers and ranchers decide how they can manage risk this year with some of the products?
Yeah, it's a big, wide question. You're right. Like disaster years are always interesting because everyone's panicking sometimes, and we're not. They're kind of our bread and butter. So the catastrophes are where we live, and it's why we're here. So right now, I think like our products are fairly well set up to handle this. If irrigation taps get shut off, and it looks like some of them might get restricted pretty heavily this year, potentially depending on what the moisture situation is in the next few months here. But yeah, we have quite a few products that cover drought risk, and particularly on the irrigation side, we have an irrigation end use in our annual crop insurance program. We also insure some hay and some export Timothy hay and some silage crops like that on the livestock side. So what we're set up for there, because the irrigation products don't generally include drought as a peril, we have a benefit that is called the water allocation restriction benefit, and that's included with the insurance coverage. So that's set up for in-year water restrictions. So if an irrigation district or the government of Alberta or Canada comes in and they say, you normally have 20 inches of water, now you have 10 inches of water. It's actually covered as a drought peril. So a producer would maintain their irrigated coverage level, but they would also get that peril if there was a drought. So if there's a production loss related to that lack of irrigation water, it's actually covered. Okay.
So if I'm a producer, and this I know for those farmers that are using irrigation, this has been, this isn't the first year we're having these conversations, but as you mentioned, it does look like there are restrictions coming. What conversation do I need to be having with my rep, or what should I be researching? What do I need to know or ask about to sort of figure out what coverage I should be pursuing?
Yes, great question. I think that there's a couple of things there. The first one is, am I eligible? What do I need to be eligible? I think that one's pretty straightforward, and there's lots of information out there on our website and in the branches. So connect with the branch, just go over that with them. That would be the first thing I would do. The second thing I would do is to ask, what do I need at the end of the year? If I have this coverage, what am I going to need to provide in a claim situation? So we have things like irrigation logs where, if you are in a claim situation, we'll ask for how much water did you put on and when, just to prove that, there is a lack of water there. And there was some water put on. In this, water allocation restriction benefit, there's actually some things that somebody would need to pay attention to, like you can move water around between crops if you want to, up to half of it. But half of it actually has to go on a field level to the crop that's insured. So if more than that is moved around, if you need to make those decisions, understand what's going on there and talking to the branch about what happens in those cases is pretty crucial.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so good records, good record keeping, always important.
Yeah.
Yeah, but maybe more important in a year like this. Okay, so record keeping for sure, understand your options, make sure you're eligible, which you're right, most would know if they are or not, but a good review. Obviously, AFSC has got some options, but there are other programs available as well. What other options exist that farmers could be pursuing potentially in looking towards risk management in a drought year like this year, potentially?
Oh yeah, there's different options across the business risk management suite, and there's some things that kind of get ignored in there, I think sometimes, or especially in a good year. One of them is agri-stability. It's the product that everybody loves to hate. There's lots of complaints about timing, et cetera, that kind of stuff. But this year, if anything gets missed, if there's anything that isn't covered through insurance or, for some reason, something isn't covered, agri-stability may cover it. It might catch some of that stuff. So it would be worth looking into. If you don't have it, or if you do have it, you don't like it, look into it, figure out how the products work together a little bit there. And there may be something that works quite well in there for you, especially in this year. AgriInvest is always there. It's a great program, not the hugest program, but it's a matching account. So, matches up to $10,000. If you put it in an account, the government of Canada, Alberta will match the funds, and you can use those for any reason. So, pretty good for short-term cash flow type stuff. I think those are the two big ones. There's also lending programs. Nobody likes lending in these situations. I don't think it's something that's kind of a last resort. How do I, get from one time period to another in a disaster? How can I get to the next, check basically, so that I can get through without some negative implications. And I think people have been going through that for the last 3 years in some areas. So, by this point in time, some of that's piling up. So maybe lending isn't the answer. Maybe looking into some of these business risk management products that actually cover some of these losses is the best thing to do, I would say.
Mm-hmm. I will note, and you did allude to it, that, maybe agri-stability isn't everyone's favorite program. It definitely has had its share of criticisms. But at the same time, it is a program that it doesn't cover losses per se, but it will cover inputs, right? Sort of not directly, but indirectly. So I think for a lot of farmers and ranchers, one of the steps to using agri-stability is understanding it maybe a bit better. So I'm going to throw in, this is just Lyndsey speaking, but I'm going to throw in, if you're considering using the program, understand it first. Because I know that it gets criticized, but at the same time, it does exist, and understanding, how it might work, as you said, Jesse, is an important part of actually using it as it's intended. So maybe it's not the greatest, but it's the one we got. So understanding it and using it can help.
Oh, 100%. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. All right, Jesse, where can farmers and ranchers go for more information if they have questions or want to check their eligibility for some of these things? Where can they go for more information?
Oh yeah, there's different avenues. I'd say we have our website, afsc.ca. All of the insuring agreements, the terms and conditions, those types of documents are on there to check things out. They can be, you have to read through them. They're really good things once you have the insurance to understand it and to get into what the details are. But connecting with the branch is really the best way to get really good information, and especially specific to your farm. So, they'll know the area, and they probably know you already, which is good or bad. They know you, and so connecting with them, just figuring out what's going to work for you and how these programs work and how they would work in different situations is so valuable. So, connect with the branch first, I think.
All right. And in the meantime, we'll all hope for rain. Jesse, thanks so much for joining me on the show today.
Yeah, thanks, Lyndsey. It's been a pleasure.
Well, next thing you know the next thing. Next is Now is a short podcast discussing agriculture's emerging next-gen tech and trends as they're happening in our industry. Next is Now, presented by GFL Ag. Listen where you get your podcasts today. Let's take a quick break, and I will be back with the final segment here of RealAg Radio. We're going to have a bit of a news update as well as a discussion on gocrops.ca.
Get all the information you need to keep your pulse crop healthy and profitable with the Pulse School on RealAgriculture.com. The Pulse School is a free YouTube video series covering agronomy, research, and more across a host of different pulse crops. It's also available as an audio podcast wherever you download or stream your favorite podcast. Check us out on YouTube or visit RealAgriculture.com. The Pulse School, brought to you by BSF Canada.
I'm Lyndsey Smith from RealAgriculture.com. Join me Monday nights for The Agronomists, a 1-hour live and interactive show broadcast across YouTube, Facebook, and X. Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, I host expert agronomists from all over the country to give you answers to some of the toughest agronomic questions. Join us live or catch the replay Tuesday morning. That's The Agronomists with me, Lyndsey Smith, Monday nights live at 8 p.m. Eastern. To RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio Channel 147. It is Wednesday, March 20th, and I am your host, Lyndsey Smith. And this segment is brought to you by the pre-emergent soil-active herbicides Valterra EZ and Fierce EZ from New Farm. Get ahead of hard-to-kill weeds. Spray after spring thaw for up to 8 weeks of extended weed control this spring. Find out more about New Farm products at newfarm.ca. I'm Lyndsey Smith with RealAgriculture.com and RealAg Radio, and joining me on the line now, I've got Matthew Cherwinski. He's the research lead with the Grain Farmers of Ontario. Matthew, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, thanks, Lyndsey. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Okay, so I got some news across my desk. I got a little excited. I knew it was coming, I'll be honest. I had a little sneak peek earlier. But we've got, for Ontario farmers, we've got gocrops.ca has launched. What is gocrops.ca?
For sure. Gocrops.ca is a brand new website that brings together 4 legacy websites. Those were the previous websites of the Ontario Corn Committee, the Ontario Cereal Crops Committee, the Ontario Pulse Crop Committee, and the Ontario Soybean and Canola Committee. Each of those 4 Ontario crop committees have had websites that have been active for many, many years. However, each one was unique to that committee, had a different navigation and structure and layout, and so the user experience was very different for each site. This new gocrops.ca webpage brings together those 4 sites under one cohesive, unified umbrella so that farmers have a consolidated one-stop shop to access variety and hybrid performance information for all the major Ontario field crops.
All right, so this is exciting, and perhaps maybe for agronomy geeks like I am, that it does. It puts everything in one spot. You did mention, of course, variety, performance data. What are some of the things that farmers will be able to look at, to search by? What are some of the data points that are going to be included on the website?
For sure. So much of the same information that existed on the 4 legacy sites will be retained on the new GoCrops page. We also took this project as an opportunity to modernize and revamp the overall look and feel. So it's also a chance to clean up some of the stuff that perhaps belongs elsewhere. So any kind of crop production or agronomy information that was previously housed on those individual crop committee sites is now going to be found more so on field crop news. And this site, gocrops.ca, is really intended to be focused exclusively on variety performance and hybrid trial information. So these are the performance trials that are conducted across the province. So we've got the Cereal Crop Committee, which conducts winter wheat, spring wheat, barley, and oat performance trials. It'll be the OPCC, which conducts the Ontario dry bean variety trials. With Ontario soybean canola, we've got the soybean variety trials. And then, what did I miss here? Corn, which conducts the Ontario hybrid corn performance trials across the province. So all the data, agronomic information, yield results, disease information, all of that will be housed now on gocrops.ca.
All right. Now, of course, this is a modernization for sure for these sites. Are there any particular sort of advantages to having gone through this process and being able to update the site, that maybe people don't notice right off the hop?
For sure, Lyndsey. There's two in particular that come to mind, and the first is that we live in a digital age where everything is at our fingertips on our phones, and so one of the elements of the build was to consider the mobile-friendly aspect of the website. So we built in this mobile-friendly tool to allow us to be able to access all the data on a phone, on a tablet, whether you're on a laptop, whether you're on a desktop. The farmer can access that information wherever they might be. So that was really, really important. The other element that we had to consider was to ensure that the new website is compliant with the AODA, or Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act. We want to make sure that we're knocking down or eliminating any barriers for farmers looking to access that information. So this new page is fully compliant with the AODA Act, just to make sure that all the information can be available in any form to whoever might need it.
Now, this does sound, and as you mentioned, of course, we had these, the 4 committees that would host, all this information was available, as well as some other, and putting this all together, what did this take to put it all together? How many groups are involved? Did GFO spearhead this, or who has sort of been the driving force behind putting this all together?
You know what? It really was a collaborative effort. I would say that the launch of Go Crops is the culmination of almost a year's worth of work. So if we go back to March 2023, the project really kick-started with a brainstorming workshop session where we brought together the 4 crop committees. We had members from each committee represented, and then they started to think about what the vision of this new site might be. So we started to talk about what are the needs, what are the must-haves of this new joint website. Truly, it was a really collaborative effort. The 4 committees were all in support of it. They all agreed that this was a really, really good idea to coordinate our efforts, work together to develop this single, cohesive, and unified tool for farmers. So as far as, the development, the design, that all came together with a lot of back and forth input, feedback, contributions from the 4 crop committee groups, all contributing to the overall look and feel and ensuring that the functional elements of the website were just how each and every one of them wanted.
Mm-hmm. Now, it's a great place to have, all that performance data all in one spot. What's your favorite part of gocrops.ca?
I think just the fact that we're enhancing and improving the overall user experience for farmers. They now have a streamlined, simplified process where they don't need to access 4 different resources or 4 different websites. It's sort of a one-stop shop. They go to one place. It acts as a centralized hub. We're looking to enhance their user experience and create this really consistent look and feel across crop types. When a farmer seeks out this information to help inform their seed selection choices for the major crops that they're growing, that they actually enjoy using that site and they get the information that they need in an easily identifiable manner. They don't have to go searching and looking.
All right. Okay. Well, this is exciting news, of course. And that site, again, that is for Ontario, that is gocrops.ca. Matthew, thanks so much for joining me on the show today. I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome, Lyndsey. It was a pleasure.
All right. Well, as promised, I did say we were going to do some news, and there's a very good reason for it. We had several things come across our desk this week. We've got not mergers, calm down, but we've got a lot of collaborations and partnerships that have cropped up. Did you hear what I did there? Okay. I do love puns. Send me your favorites. I adore them. Anyway, we got a couple different things that we need to talk about. All exciting news, of course. And there is one that I wanted to mention just quickly. Kelvin Hepner has been on this one. Farmer's Edge, for those of you who are familiar, Farmer's Edge has officially delisted and is going back private. So, it's one of those things that we often cover when a business goes public and starts to sell shares. Farmers Edge now Fairfax Fairfax Holdings has the main owner of Farmers Edge has now taken it private. So that did happen as of yesterday. But on that note, we've got a few collaborations to talk about. So you may have heard that there were some rumblings of issues between John Deere, Kinsey, and Ag Leader. They have worked out their differences, it appears, and have actually put together an agreement to work together. So the companies now say that Kinsey and Ag Leader's planting and display products will seamlessly integrate with John Deere's operations center. This, of course, has been a bone of contention between the companies. The companies have also, in putting together this agreement, they have agreed to resolve all outstanding litigation through this deal with John Deere and will license certain planter designs to Kinsey and Ag Leader to allow them to continue selling their True Speed and Sure Speed products. So if you have been one of the farmers who have been impacted by this or have been hearing rumblings that this was happening, this is one of those things that should be good news for those who potentially use Kinsey and Ag Leader. Everything should be tickety-boo now working with John Deere. Now, you did hear yesterday, so this does bring up an interesting sort of twist in a topic that we are touching on quite often. And yesterday you heard Carlo Dade and you heard talking about this bill that's in the Senate, talking about interoperability. And this sort of runs along those lines of part of the issues that we have with a lot of companies developing proprietary software is there really has to be some way that products can talk to each other. And without an agreement like this, we run into maybe not litigation issues all the time, but we can certainly run into productivity issues where different platforms simply don't speak to each other. And so this is good news. For anyone using Kinsey or Ag Leader products and John Deere, they will be working together to seamlessly integrate, as they say, these products into the John Deere Operations Center. So there you go. Okay. In other collaborative news, we did get word that GrainFox will be making its foray into the U.S. market. They are partnering with Ag Resource, so certainly a common name in the U.S. And GrainFox, you might remember, so GrainFox is a subsidiary of FarmLink Marketing Solutions, and that's Mark Lepp, who set that up, based in Winnipeg, actually. My old hometown. So there you go. Okay. And we also had another collaboration that was announced. For those of you in Western Canada, you will see that BASF's digital farming platform Xarvio is going to be used by Richardson International. So Richardson Pioneers Agronomic Network will now use the Xarvio Field Manager agronomic platform across the 4 Canadian provinces. Also in the news today, our own Bern Tobin, of course, was at the March Classic this week. That's the Grain Farmers of Ontario annual meeting. And to the surprise of many, the Ontario Premier Doug Ford hopped on over and made a surprise speech at the conference. And if you would like to see, there is video, and Bern's done up a report on Doug Ford joining the show. His main message really was time to scrap the carbon tax. And honestly, I don't think that's a refrain that's going to get any arguments in that audience, or frankly, most agriculture audiences at this point. And it does, and I'm sure we're going to talk about this on the issues panel on Friday, it definitely begs the question if the Liberal government really has overstayed its welcome on sticking with this carbon tax, and if they will actually, in a bid to regain popularity, if they'll actually axe this tax or if they'll stick with it. It's going to be interesting to see. Now, I did want to touch on, just hopping off the collaboration side for just a moment, I did want to bring back, we did ask last week about what government Canadian farmers thought would get Canada the best deal should the USMCA go to a full renegotiation in 2026. Let's face it, we're probably going to see some sort of discussion about moving the bar on some of the things within this trade deal. It may not be a full-blown renegotiation, but we're probably going to see some things change. We did want to know, who do you think will be best suited to negotiate a good deal for Canada? Perhaps not surprisingly, the overwhelming majority, so right now sitting at about 60%, say a Conservative government would get the best outcome for Canada. However, the second most popular option, 29% who voted, said it doesn't matter either way. Canada is going to lose out. Yeesh. That is not necessarily, that's almost 30% of people who think that. So, would love to know if you share that thought, if you think either it's a bad deal for Canada when we renegotiate USMCA, or if we do, or if you feel that the Conservatives or the Liberals are best suited to get Canada a good deal. let us know. You can, of course, call that RealAg feedback line, 1-855-776-6147, or you can find us across social media at RealAgriculture. You can use that hashtag RealAg Radio. We'll find it just fine. All right, that does it for me and for another episode of RealAg Radio. I will be back tomorrow, as promised, with the Farmer Rapid Fire, brought to you by Pioneer Seeds Canada. We'll be going, of course, across the country, finding out what's keeping everybody busy this March on the farm. Thanks so much for joining me on the show today. Thank you to all my guests. And of course, thanks to producer Jay for putting this all together. We'll talk to you again. Cheers.
Thank you for downloading this episode of the RealAg Radio podcast, brought to you by Barricade 2 Herbicide from FMC. Use Barricade 2 Herbicide for consistent, powerful control of the toughest in-crop weeds without harming your wheat, oats, or barley crop. Barricade 2 Herbicide. Tough on weeds, gentle on crops.